welcome to the Marriage Unmasked podcast. Today we are talking about when a good woman is accidentally tearing down her husband. When I say good woman, I don't really like to call anybody good or bad, but what I'm talking about there is like she's loving, right? She's faithful, she's committed, she is a capable woman. And this is happening not because she doesn't care about her husband. She really does. Actually, she cares so much. The point is she's not feeling safe. It's really not about him. It's more about the unhealed wounds going on in her. And so it's really coming from a place of fear that she ends up tearing him down. So it's not about blaming. It's not about making her feel bad, because that never works. It doesn't work to make him feel bad. It doesn't work to make her feel bad. This is about awareness and understanding the bigger issue that's going on underneath: the fear, the self-protection, the survival patterns that are happening. That's really what this is about.
On my Instagram, when I have guys like chiming in, I talk about the pain points of husbands, and they talk about wives. They use the verse from Proverbs 14:1 that says, "A wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman tears her house down." It caused me pause sometimes to get that passage so much, because it's often pulled out of context and really used as an ammunition against women.
Yeah.
To like shame them into behaving a certain way, and that is not at all what the Bible meant with that passage. It's not there to shame women into different performance, into shaping up as a wife. That's not the point. That passage is really talking a lot about the difference between foolishness and wisdom. And when the Bible talks about foolishness and wisdom, it's not talking about intelligence. It's really talking about your relationship with God. So if you're walking in wisdom, that means that you're in tune with God. Your thinking and the way you're living is in tune with God. It's in relationship with God. It's out of love for Him. And if you're walking in foolishness, that just means that you're out of tune with God, that you're more in tune with yourself and what you want as opposed to what God wants, or you're in more of a self-protective state.
I often ask God to help me see people or to see things the way He sees them. And that's kind of how I look at that. Like that wisdom is like, I'm seeing things the way God sees them, or I'm seeing my husband the way God sees him, or whatever. Whereas foolishness is referring to like when you're missing the perspective that God sees things and the truth of what's really going on.
This passage, it's not ammunition against women. It's wisdom. It's a description of what it looks like for man or a wife. And that's another thing too, is this passage, it's not just for women. If you look at the whole context of Scripture, I mean, this applies to men too. It's not just the woman's responsibility to build or fault if it's being torn down. The man is also responsible here.
And when I'm talking about seeing ourselves or seeing others, seeing situations the way God sees them, I think that applies here for the women, right? Because most women, they don't even necessarily know what's going on deep inside of them. And God sees our hearts. God sees our wounds. He sees them even more clearly than we do, even when we start to become aware of them. He sees them even more clearly. And so we don't realize, I mean, this was me, right? I was tearing my husband down. I'll just say that right now because I'm about to get into it more. And that was me. And I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand even the impact of what I was doing. It was out of a survival mode, like a nervous system response. And thankfully, God walked with us so beautifully that we could create safety to start to unravel some of these things. But for me, I mean, it really started way back, like when I was a little girl. And I learned very early that love wasn't reliable. Things were unsafe. And then other things have just kind of added to that, other unsafe situations and traumatic experiences. I mean, the basic belief that I learned back then was, if I stay alert, then I won't get hurt. And I'm not trying to rhyme that. That is just literally the best way to say it.
This is well done. I like that rhyme. It's good.
And so my body is always on alert. It's on alert for how to protect myself. It's on alert for what could be dangerous. What do I need to avoid? Where should I put up a wall? All these things that I'm on alert for, it's just a nervous system response so that I can avoid pain as much as possible. And maybe for you, that might have looked like when you were little, or maybe it's now, or maybe it was in a past relationship or whenever, but maybe your emotions were dismissed, or you had inconsistent care. Any caregiver in your life, if that was inconsistent, this can produce a similar thing, right? Or maybe you had unpredictability, or your parents had a lot of wounds that they carried around that they didn't know about, they didn't understand. And so they were showing up in a way that was really unhealthy. Maybe you learned, I think this is something that you can relate to too, is like safety and love had to be earned. That can also really create a lot of unsafety. And then if you learned that vulnerability, right, to be vulnerable, to be open, that that's not safe, that also contributes to some of these beliefs that keep you in this survival mode instead of helping you just relax into the beautiful woman that you were created to be. And you are, that's who you are. But that gets covered over by all these wounds and this survival mode and the techniques that we use to try to protect ourselves. And so for me, the key belief that I kind of came into marriage with was, I need to keep myself safe. I had learned over the years, nobody else is gonna keep you safe, right? Even God, I did not have that relationship with him back then where I felt safe with him either. And so it was like, I'm the one. And so I showed up strong, and I showed up very hard, and I showed up in ways that then to my husband were unhelpful eventually, as we kind of got into more and more dysfunctional communication and etc. in our marriage. Yeah. It really did tear him down.
So what this can often look like in the marriage is it can look like doing a lot of correcting instead of connecting, that you see me doing things a certain way and always trying to kind of manage or micromanage how that needs to be done. Maybe it's household chores, maybe it's parenting, yeah, definitely parenting too. Like discipline has to be a certain way, that controlling, that managing of things. So it can show up that way. It can also be trying to critique the way things are being done. Like when I was driving, she would make comments like, "Oh, turn your cruise control on. You got to turn this way." Maybe I would drift a little bit, and she would be very upset, feeling unsafe and things like that. Which some of that's understandable. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But my driving, again, out of her need to feel safe, she was often really trying to critique and control and make sure that everything was going a certain way, instead of necessarily inviting a different way of doing things or appreciating a different perspective of how things could be done.
Yeah, again, it comes back to the posture that you're holding as a woman. And it was, for me and for so many other women who are in this situation, it was just fear, right? A lot of fear, and it's deep down. I didn't feel afraid. I actually felt very strong, right? Very confident. He looked at me as like, she's the confident one. She's the one with the plan. She's the one, right? Because that's the appearance that you have it all together, that you've got it. And that's why a lot of times he wouldn't step up even when I'm hurting, because he's like, well, she'll just handle it herself.
Yeah, there wasn't room. I didn't feel like there was space sometimes to step in and handle things, because in my mind it had to be a certain way. And that's what I've developed as a story in my head.
And I think there was also a lot of actual attacks on him, right? Just who he is. I remember telling him things I didn't like he doesn't like the same kind of music as me. And I'm like, I don't know why you like that music. And I remember as he's talking to it and I'm thinking about this, I just feel this heaviness come back. Like that's what I was living in. I was living in this really heavy burden that I was carrying around, because I'm really taking God's job, which is to keep me safe and to take care of me and to protect me and provide for me. And I'm trying to do it myself. Again, it comes back to that story. I need to keep myself safe because nobody else is. Deep down, that fear, that's what's showing up, right? It's showing up as this over responsibility, over functioning, being in more of this masculine presence where I'm trying to maintain a really strong outer shell. Nobody can hurt me. Nobody can attack me. Nobody can make me feel a certain way. It might show up as like having really high standards, and Adam brought that up too. And I had struggled with perfectionism, because I had thought that if I behaved perfectly, then I would be safe. That was another thought I had early on, and I had been trying to work through that through my college years. I had started to realize that was happening for me, and it was really unhealthy. And it still was showing up a little bit in our marriage, especially in the early years. Sometimes it would even show up as like, well, I'm just being honest, right? I think a lot of wives, it's like, well, I'm just being honest. I'm just telling him the way it really is. I'm just telling him what he needs to hear, instead of, yes, truth is important, but truth in love. And it wasn't necessarily coming out in a loving way. It's coming from that fear again. And so it's coming in a harsh way with a different energy than love. And I think another thing that was really going on for me deep in my heart, which I did not realize until just even, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, the way I was brought up in the religious stuff that I was taught, it was a lot of law. It was a lot of, you need to do this right. This is bad. This is good. This is wrong. This is right. And follow the rules. Do the right thing.
Right. You're going to be safe if you follow the rules. Like that's where safety comes from, is by doing things right and not doing things wrong.
And so I'm thinking, okay, right, wrong, and Adam's wrong. So I need to let him know that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And I thought that was going to motivate him or help our marriage if I just kept picking out all the ways that he needed to do better. And I was doing that to myself, like, to be fair. But I was also like, well, this is how I talk to myself. I tell myself, well, you should have done better. Well, that was wrong. Well, that was bad. And so it was just an outpouring of what was going on in my own heart towards myself. And so I thought that's the way. That's the way you get someone to change. You tell them they need to do better, that that's wrong, that that's bad. And what really works is actually love, right? God's love. That passage, his kindness leads to repentance. It's his love, his kindness, his compassion, and ours, right? My love for Adam, that actually brings about healing and change and growth. It's not me shaming him and me telling him to do better and me catching him in every little way that he maybe is getting it wrong. But that is what I was living in, and that's what I thought was going to actually help him and help our marriage. And it was just way off because it was doing the opposite.
Yeah, all that does is it really changes outward behavior only. It doesn't actually get to the heart. It doesn't actually do true change. It causes somebody to perform differently, but it doesn't actually inspire change from a loving place, motivated by love. And that's already where I was coming from a lot, is I was already coming from this place of performance and needing to do things the right way in order to earn love. In a subconscious way in my mind, that's what I was then doing in our relationship, was trying to earn her love by performing and doing things quote unquote right in order to get her love.
Yeah, and so I just added, like, my voice just added on to all the other voices that had already spoken into his beliefs about how he needed to just perform. And so it was very unhelpful. But I think a lot of wives, that thought underneath is like, if I don't manage this, everything's going to fall apart. And I definitely felt that too. You're carrying this burden, and so then you feel like you can't let go of any of it, because if you, okay, well, fine, I'll let him do the finances, but I remember last month he totally dropped the ball on that credit card. It's the fear again, and we're like, if I let go, boom, it's just gonna blow up. We have to rebuild trust, because otherwise we're just really allowing some of these really deep wounds to kill the connection for us. And one of the big ways it does that is that control, it actually replaces curiosity. So where curiosity actually can bring connection and understanding and compassion, control assumes. I'm going to assume that this is why he did that. I'm going to assume he's going to do that again. I'm going to assume that, this is the man that he is and he'll never change. And so I'm making all these assumptions instead of asking questions, instead of being honestly curious. It's a heart posture. If I am genuinely curious, because I am relaxed, right? Or am I controlling because I am afraid? That's the difference there. And then another way that connection is destroyed is that as women, we're withdrawing emotionally. We're letting go of the softness and the impact we have as women. Because women, we have so much power to impact everyone around us. With our femininity, we really do. But when we are scared, right? And we don't want to be disappointed again. We don't want to feel hurt again. And so we're just doing anything we can to avoid that. And so we'll even withdraw emotionally, close off those soft, sensitive parts of us and put this hard shell around it. And it all just comes back to these deep wounds of feeling unloved. I know for me, it just was coming up over and over. I didn't even realize that I even had these wounds at all until a couple of years ago. And I was like, whoa, when I started to kind of come back to the woman I was and allow myself to feel again, then it was like all these things kept coming up for me. And one of those emotions was feeling unloved, right? Feeling insignificant, feeling forgotten. And those are really painful things that I had carried for so long, and I had put this hard shell on to protect from feeling those things again, because those are deeply painful things for anyone to feel. And the things I'd experienced were very deeply painful to experience. And so I had pushed it down. I had put the hard shell up, and then when I finally took that down, the emotions were intense. And it's okay. I don't want you to be scared of that. It's not like I couldn't, deal with it. It was something that actually was so beautiful, the way God was with me and showing me that he was loving me, that I was significant to him, that I wasn't forgotten, that I mattered so much to him. Yeah. That actually was so healing, and it deepened my relationship with him in a way that I don't think anything else could. So those things are necessary. And it's okay. It's okay to have these emotions and notice them and realize, okay, I need that healing. My heart needs that, and I'm going to give it to myself.
So wounds can really show up for a man too in this situation when his wife is being critical or disrespectful to him. And I want to explain that a little bit, because just like a woman needs to feel loved and cherished in order to feel safe in a relationship and really show up in her feminine and her softness and her strength as a woman, so a man also needs to feel strong in a relationship. And he often feels strong in that relationship by receiving respect and honor. And that's important for a man outside of the relationship too. Like, it's survival for a man really in the world is to be respected, to be honored, to know that he's capable. Because deep down, men need to know that we are enough, that we have what it takes to accomplish what we're here to accomplish. You won't thrive in the world without respect. You'll be seen as less than, you'll be seen as insignificant, you won't be able to have the same opportunities. So it's very important for a man to feel respected and honored. He feels strong in his marriage, he feels strong in who he is, and he can show up stronger in his masculinity in the marriage. And that strength encourages that safety and being cherished and loved, and her softness and her kindness encourage him to be strong. And so the two work very well together. And so what often happens then when a man is receiving a lot of criticism and harshness from his wife is like three different things can happen. It can open up shame wounds in him. I had wounds from my childhood that had to do with shame and whether I was good enough. And it opened those wounds up, and it caused me to really go to a place of deeper shame. Because now, if my wife, who is my closest companion, who really sees into me, she is basically saying, you're not enough, that you don't measure up, then I'm making that mean something about my worth and my value as a man. And it was crushing because it really struck a hole in my sense of being a man, my masculinity. And so that is really hard then as a man, because you're stuck in this place of shame, and that shame will just perpetuate itself, and it keeps you feeling not good enough, and then you can go into a shame spiral and you can stay stuck in that, rather than stepping into your God-given abilities as a man and being strong. I needed healing in my heart from God for that too. It wasn't Kara's job to make me feel like a man either. It wasn't Kara's job to heal the shame that I had, but it did awaken more of that shame when she was showing up a certain way. And another thing it can do is it can cause a man to go into a performance mode. Because what often happens, men, we're very much trying to do things. We're task-oriented for the most part. We want to accomplish things, do things. And so when we're getting criticism and negative feedback from our wife, we tend to try to fix that, solve that by doing things differently. So then we start to shapeshift and form and perform in order to get loved again, in order to get respect and honor from her. Then what ends up happening is it imbalances the masculinity and femininity again, because now she's like the coach and you're like the player because you're trying to perform in order to get approval. Or she's like the teacher and you're the student because you're trying to perform in order to get approval. And you're never getting that. You're never actually performing enough, so then that feeds the shame again. Instead of realizing that as a man, what you need to do is not go after performance in order to fix this, but to tune into presence and to be very present and very strong in who you are, instead of making who you are depend on how she's responding to you or critiquing you. And so that's a big thing that this can do for a man. And then another one is isolation. This can cause a lot of isolation for men because we as men often don't have a huge support system outside of our family. We might have buddies that we maybe talk about surface level things, but we don't go deep with them. And if you're a man, having that deeper relationship with other men is hugely important. But what can happen is her criticism can often cause us to kind of shell up, to close off, to wall up, to withdraw more from the relationship. Even though she's crying out for more from us, she's crying out for us to step in. Mm-hmm. A lot of times the harshness and the criticism and all these to-dos and the managing, it makes us actually withdraw and close off from the relationship and not step in and not do things. We start to become a bit more passive because we don't think we can do it anyway. We start to doubt ourselves in that situation. And so a lot of men put their wife as like their number one emotional support in life. And so now if your number one emotional support in life is now hurting your heart, you're starting to really close off from her in a hard way, and you feel a little lost and confused if you don't have other safe places to get that emotional support, especially God. And then also other men. If you're not going to those other places for some support, especially in that situation, it will affect how you're showing up in the relationship. That's what we do inside of my Refined Men's community, is we support each other. We go after healing for our hearts with God and with each other so that we can show up strong. We can heal some of these shame things and these wounds that are affecting our identity, how we see ourselves as men, and then we can show up stronger in our relationship for our wives, mm-hmm. and not so dependent and not so reliant on our wife to get that sense of worth or to get that approval and to build our sense of strength in the relationship. Mm-hmm. So it's extremely important for us as men to really have that support as well.
Yeah, I mean, the two people are just in so much pain. And the turning point really is rebuilding trust, for women at least. You want to really rebuild trust, first with yourself, because you may have hurt yourself. You may have lost trust with yourself as you've buried your own heart and you said, no, I'm not going to allow you to feel that. No, I'm going to put a shell over you, denying who you really are. And so you want to rebuild trust with yourself. You want to rebuild trust with God. A lot of times we say it right in our heads, I trust God. You read the Bible passages, you say the things, but yet really felt in your heart, it's not there. You actually have a lot of questions that you're afraid to even ask, or you don't even know that you want to ask them. And then rebuilding trust with others. Again, it's so much more about what's going on in your head. It's really down here. It needs to be a felt experience. What I want to help you get to is this knowing that even if things are painful, that you will not be abandoned, right? You will not be abandoned, not by God and not by yourself. And hopefully not by your husband, right? But for both men and women, you are not dependent on your husband to be the most amazing, masculine, strong man, to be okay. And he is not dependent on you to be constantly building his ego and all the things.
Yeah, because otherwise you're making your spouse into a god. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really what you're doing. You're making your spouse into a god, and you're getting your strength and your capability from them, instead of being strong in God and then coming to your spouse from that strength.
So no matter if it's your wife who is really hurting you and tearing you down, or it's your husband who has slunk down into shame or whatever, and you have your own unhealed wounds, you are not stuck. You can get your power back and move forward. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so interesting when we look back at the story of Ruth and Naomi in the Bible, right? We have Ruth, she's rebuilding the trust. She was deeply hurt. She's from Moab, and she marries this man who's not even from her country. I don't know why she married him, but she did. And then he dies, and then basically all the male members of the family die, and so she's left alone with her sister-in-law and her mother-in-law. And I don't know about you, but if that happened to me, I don't know what I would be, but I wouldn't be good. But she is grounded. She is trusting. She's really trusting God, and she's living from this place of peace and rest, relaxation in who she is. It's beautiful. She's like, where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. All these things. She's ready to go to another country, leave her own family, go to a new country to be with her mother-in-law. That's pretty amazing, in my opinion. And then we have Naomi, she's the mother-in-law. Her husband dies, both of her sons die. She's really hurting. She even asks people to call her bitter. That's who she feels like. She feels bitter, and she's trying to take control. She's like, we're going to go back to my land, right? I'm leaving this place. I think deep down she was afraid, and she felt unloved. I think she had these wounds and was trying to protect herself. And she even told Ruth at one point, like, just leave me. So she was in just a really hurting place. It's just really interesting to see the difference there. And, it's such a beautiful step to take. I actually just did a module in my Femininity Restored course, which is only available to the Wives and Restored. It's just such a powerful course. But anyway, I just did the module on rebuilding trust. And so I'm really amped about this right now. But it's so powerful to do this deep inner work. You wouldn't even think this is needed. You might think, well, yeah, I just need to try to be softer or just try to be more feminine. But it is the deep stuff that's just so woven in under there that it's really, this course is just so helpful in bringing it to the surface and then bringing healing in all these little places that are impacting how you're showing up. So I'm just so excited for you to start to identify some of these things and invite that love and compassion, that healing in for your heart, because I know you're hurting.
And so when you are doing that deeper work and you're no longer focused on just trying to do the thing or perform differently, but you're actually doing that really deep work and healing this pain, then you start to show up in a different way in your marriage. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And it's so powerful because I know when Kara started to like speak truth to me, because she always spoke truth, right? She always spoke truth, but it was not always truth in love. And that's such a powerful passage. We bring that one in so many times because it's so impactful. But like when Kara started to speak truth, she started to speak what was really true, but speak it in a loving and kind and gentle and inviting way. It invited me to really listen to what she was saying rather than to defend against how she was saying it. Because, and this is a complaint a lot of men have, is like, I don't have a problem with what she's saying. It's just that she's saying it, her tone and the way she's coming across is so demeaning to me that it causes me to viscerally shut down when she's actually speaking in a way that's loving and kind. And that doesn't always work. If a man's in a really deep shame spiral, like that happened to me too. Like she can speak in a really loving way and I can still not receive it if I'm in that deep shame place already. Because men, you got to do your own healing too. But that is so powerful. Another thing that a more healed woman will do is set boundaries. And now Kara was probably setting boundaries, but they were out of self-protection. They were like harsh. It felt more like punishment from my perspective. But if we need to set a boundary in our relationship now, she does it in a very clear way, in a very kind way, and it's to protect the relationship, not to just protect herself. And it no longer feels like punishment because I'm aware of why she's setting that boundary. I'm aware of what she's going for and the part of the relationship that she's really trying to protect by setting that boundary. And so Kara, when she was healing some of these things, she would still desire growth in me, but she doesn't have this fearfulness. There's not this graspiness to it. She's able to ask for what she wants without demanding and trying to control that, and to simply offer things to me, to say, hey, I see it this way, and to invite me along on that journey instead of demand it or try to control that growth. Instead of just saying things, she will pause and actually respond instead of reacting. That's also really helpful. She'll ask questions instead of assuming things. Whereas before she might assume my motive was this, or she might assume that this was coming from a bad place. And she asks in such a beautiful way for things that she needs now, from a softer, more feminine energy. And it's so different. It is so healing. It is so powerful. And it draws me in instead of this knee-jerk reaction to close down or to shut her out. Because now I want to do it out of love. Not out of force or fear. I want to do it because I love this woman so much, and I want to change because that is a way of loving her the way she's loving me. And she also lets God carry what's not hers to carry. She trusts that God will do the work in my heart that needs to be done in order to make those changes, instead of trying to prescribe those changes or trying to control those changes. She leaves it in God's hands. And it reminds me of that passage from 1 John 4:18 that says, perfect love drives out fear. When you're operating from love instead of from fear, it's just such a different energy in the relationship. And we're loved by God. From that place of love, we no longer have to operate in fear.
And don't let Adam fool you. I'm definitely not the perfect wife, but it has been a really incredible shift. And I've seen it just as I have invited more of that love into my heart, not just up in my head, not just knowledge, but it's a felt experience. And when you know deeply in your heart how loved you are, it naturally heals and naturally changes things for you. Because fear leaves when that safety is practiced and when that's felt, not when behavior is controlled. And so that's why a lot of times we don't talk about like, okay, if you're a woman who's tearing down her husband, then you need to do this, 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 and this. Do these 5 steps, right? Because it's not about that. It's in being who you are, not in doing.
It's in letting God do the healing, because that's the power for a man or for a woman, to let God do the healing, to feel safe in him, to have his love and his honor. That's where you get it from. You really get it from God. That is where the power really lies, is in God, not in you, not in doing all the things.
And he will amaze you. I can't wait to hear how he surprises you with his love. We hope that you, both husband and wife, felt seen in this episode. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please rate, review the podcast. Send us a message anytime, because we really love hearing your feedback. If there's anything that you want us to talk about on future episodes, let us know, because we're here to serve you. And we can't wait to see you next week.